One point that I do truly love from my last video, that standard is spread out more than maybe any other era of Vanguard, is something I've wanted to show off as soon as possible with two decks from widely separated media. In one corner is Fated 1 of 0 Blangdmire, the deck of the rival/villain of the first Divine season. Fated 1 and Divine skill user, he has the highest kill count out of anyone in the anime. Just ignore convoluted time travel. And in the other corner is Vyrgilla, deck of the Skyride manga's protagonist, who in his first chapter beats a thug from an enemy gang and then in retaliation gets bombed and almost drowns. This manga is actually superb, by the way. Blangdmire in-game has a ride line focused on amassing soul, checking the top 3 cards of your deck when rode upon and putting all grade 1s and higher to soul to keep the triggers still in deck, as well as drawing you a card if you get 2 or more in soul. Blangdmire when attacking can bind 4 cards from your soul face down to draw a card, force the opponent to bind 2 of their rear guards face down, effectively removing these cards from the game, and then gets 5,000 power for every 2 of your face down bound cards. At the beginning of the guard step, when you have 8 or more face down bound cards, you can give him a crit to use his Divine skill. This is a technical ruling, since there's no cost, but it had to be optional somehow in case you didn't want to use it, since an effect having a cost makes using it inherently optional. Using the Divine skill restricts the opponent from calling or playing any sentinels for the rest of the turn. Playing as in blitz orders, since you don't call orders. On top of that, he also removes the abilities from the opponent's current Vanguard until your next turn, meaning they have no effects and not even their great ability. Your twin or triple drive Vanguard gets hit with his all-erasing nuke and gets demoted to a singular drive check, since all units inherently have one drive check. Twin and triple drive is just a great ability that modifies that. On top of that, the opponent also loses their effects, so something like Rezael's Divine skill or Lashiafel's Divine skill also gets wiped out. Blangdmire's main strategy is to thin the deck using the ride line and build soul for 0. He then controls the field with a strong yet kinda understandably fair removal effect. The deck on its own only has 4 ways to get any real power, so unless you get a good lucky rush, granted with not a lot of grade 1s, you're usually not attacking for intimidating numbers unless it is one of the main 3. So because of that, a strong removal effect goes a long way, especially since your ride line is essentially the only way you get free cards in hand when you already need to dig for your best cards. Because of this small blind spot, Blangdmire can really suffer against early game aggro, making the bind effect a good way to mediate the rush or even keep it at bay with just the sheer threat of it alone. And fighting against it, you get to choose what you keep, so that's pretty nice. In DZ8 comes One Who Walks from 0, Blangdmire NEXUS, a new form that also counts as the original, letting you Persona ride onto it, Overlord could never, and also has the effect that if you have a Blangian soul, he gets its Divine skills, and the front row gets 5k on your turn, adding to the power you get and throwing some much needed pressure on top. His skill to bind cards is instead an act ability during your main phase, and can alternatively be paid with just binding a single Blangdmire from soul. Instead of drawing a card though, you have the option to do that, or call a rear guard from your face down bound cards, thus also taking your Vanguard's card generation up a notch. Here's my deck for today. Other key cards are Alchemist, one of my top 5 Vanguard twinks of all time, who when boosting Vanguard can counterblast 1 to stand a rear guard, giving it 15k if you have 8 or more face down bound cards. Zamu can get you some soul and draw, but more importantly can energy blast 3 when attacking to give himself 5k and a crit for that attack. Not if he already has an extra crit though. This is a good way to make an optional hit a must guard to eat up the opponent's defenses and prep for Blangdmire's Divine skill turn. Next is Vadrock, who on call can counterblast 1 to soul charge 1, then call something from soul to rear. It goes back at end of turn if you're not on Blangdmire though, but he also gets 10k for every 4 cards you have bound face down. One popular strategy is to use Game of Underworld to give Vadrock's boost and make for some seriously high power attacks. This deck doesn't use it however, since setting up this combo can take up valuable deck space and can be underwhelming if you don't get Vadrock specifically to boost other rear guards. On top of that, the culmination of this combo dies off once your boosting Vadrocks get retired or you don't have an attacker for them to support. Instead, I'm using Colossus to fill out the deck's need for power and card generation. When attacking, he gets 10k, then puts himself to soul, and when puts a soul while you have a Blangdmire Vanguard, draws you a card and binds himself face down, meaning using Butcher or Falcratia can get him back and when puts a soul by anything while on grade 3, scores you a free draw. Also fixing the issue of boosters, setup, and card generation is Elaborate Wizard. You couldn't have thought of a better name? What is this, magic? I'm out here playing my wary thespians and reclusive taxidermists. With it, builds a bit of soul on call, and after boosting can grab normal units from soul to hand and then bind himself face down. Vyrgilla is a simple enough deck. You want to call rear guards for your Vanguard to get stronger, namely the grade 2 can get a critical if you have 4 rear guards, and when rode upon by another Vyrgilla, lets you grab any grade 2 from your deck. One option is your ultimate skill orders. There was only one at the time of recording, the new one gives a restanding rear a critical, but this one costs 1 counterblast and checks top 5 for a card to call to rear, then giving your Vanguard 3000 power for every normal unit on rear or in drop, letting your Vanguard reach higher numbers the later the game goes on. Your grade 3 is even more simple. During your main phase, he can energy blast 3 to resurrect a grade 2 and bind an opponent's rear guard. Attacking, he can counterblast 1 to restand a grade 2 rear, and that's it. Your alternate grade 3 rewrite form ALFKNIGHTS can bind your grade 3 rearguard to ride himself from hand if the opponent is at grade 3. When rode, he grabs you an ultimate skill and calls a Galaxian from deck. He also gives the front row 5,000 power for each copy of himself in Soul, gives himself a third drive check, and gets an effect to restand your front row rearguards when he attacks. Yeah, this is pretty strong. Galaxians are Vyrgilla's key rearguards. Ezreal is a 15k power, 15k shield, grade 2 with a mate ability. If I had a nickel for every one instance keyword ability Vyrgilla has, I'd have 2 really weird nickels. Mate unit basically just means he can't be called unless you're on Vyrgilla. Vanguard can buff your rearguards on call, and at the end of the turn, goes to Soul to draw a card and countercharge if you played an ultimate skill, and cause more energy charges when boosting Ezreal, even restanding when it restands. Finally in the deck is Variance Ray, who gets shield and can also buff Ezreal with extra power and shield and effect protection. And then also Shenri, who cycles as a booster, and Nerman, who checks top 5 for grade 3s. For the sake of getting to the fight, we'll go over everything else as we go. The final thing I want to share is that if you are looking for some cards, I would like to ask that you check out my sponsor, Ronin Cards. It's a fine store for fine cards that you can use to support me. Use the link in the description and use code SHERIFF for 5% off your order to help support me and my channel. If you don't want any cards or any cards you want are too expensive,
give me money and I will draw for you.
Because I also do art commissions. I mostly draw Vanguard stuff, and I either draw full pictures or chibis that I like to use as energy counters. Look at them, they're so adorable. So without further delay, please enjoy the fight.
Alright, let's do this.
So, goddamn was there a lot of rulings in this video, huh? I hope there wasn't too many random notes off to the side, but I do generally consider anything that I add there for just a second not something that's actually, like, important to you watching the video. So joining me for this fight is channel regular Dan, and he's actually the owner of both of these decks we're playing today, so I borrowed his Blangdmire build. On my next turn though, I'll ride and my grade 1 will check the top 3 cards in my deck, luckily putting 2 in there to let me draw a card. I then call Philia and attack for 21 altogether. Front trigger doesn't do much, but 1 damage is scored. With Dan's grade 1, he's able to Soul Blast 1 instead of discarding to ride to grade 2. Despite grade 2 Vyrgilla being able to get a crit, Dan can't really afford to call any rearguards since any are just gonna get bound by Blangdmire. Anyways, I guard 1 attack and take another after a trigger is checked, and I don't get anything. I'm sorry for the constant interruptions, but there's one more thing I really want to pick your mind about. I've been thinking about opening a Patreon, and I wanted to ask what you think about it. The benefits I had in mind for my patrons wouldn't be anything too related to my videos, mostly because my videos take a while to make anyways, quality over quantity, so something like behind the scenes, early screenings, or even exclusive videos, I'm just not gonna do. But one thing I could totally do, and would love to do, is have the names of every patron appear in the video. So that's one thing I can definitely do, but the others are more art-oriented. I'd offer patrons a discount on all my commissions, as well as access to the files for all my art. So any design that I've made for an energy counter, sticker, or mat, all of which I've made many of and plan to make more of, could all be accessible to you in their highest quality and without watermarks, meaning they'll be perfect for your own personal use or printing them out yourself. Since I can't really afford to sell merch online, this will have to do. Any nice design I've made for a playmat or something you can then get, and then through some other website, order it for yourself. So if this sounds cool to you, please let me know. And now back to the fight. On my turn though, I ride to Blangdmire, and my grade 2 is going to check the top 3 again. Fang skill to... wow. Put any grade 1 and higher to Soul my ass. At least with Fang's skill, the triggers get shuffled back into deck. Anyways, I'm calling my ace unit. With his unique skill, I can Energy Blast 3 to check the top 7 cards in my deck for a card to put to Soul, then I can call something from Soul to rear. I find Zamoog and then immediately call him out. With his on-play skill, I'm going to Counterblast 1 and check top 3, and put any number of them into Soul. If I put 1 or more, I can draw a card. I then attack with Blangdmire, binding 4 cards from Soul face down, also of course forcing Dan to bind his singular rearguard face down, and attacking for 36 altogether. The ace unit attacks for 15 because he got 5 from being called, and then because I'm bored and I have 3 spare energy, Zamoog is attacking for an extra critical, just for fun. At 15k though, he gets blocked, but at least that's another trigger out of Dan's hand. Finally though, I forget that Philia is a card, and decide yeah, I do want to use her. Anyways, on Dan's turn, he's gonna ride, and with his grade 2 skill, because he rode into a Vyrgilla, he can search his deck for any grade 2 he wants. And then he'll use his Regalis piece, basically just serving as a gun cycler thanks to Union in the Sky's other effect. Dan's also using Vyrgilla's axe skill, using up the last of his energy to bind my Zamoog and resurrect a grade 2. But Dan didn't have anything to resurrect, and he's gonna go into ALFKNIGHTS. By binding his grade 3 Vyrgilla Vanguard, he gets a new Vanguard. And right off the bat, this one is gonna search him an ultimate skill order, as well as search for any Galaxian from his deck to call to rear. Vanguard is getting called, and with his skill when placed, Soul Blast 1 to give him and Ezreal 10k for the turn because the opponent is at grade 3. And Dan now uses Stardust Blade, checking top 5 for a new rearguard, as well as buffing up his Vanguard by 3k for each of his normal units on rear or in drop. This first attack for 23 I guard, but the second attack for 25 I take, hoping for a trigger wouldn't have mattered too much with my hand. Vyrgilla now with the ultimate skill's effect, making this a 31k attack. Also part of this skill is counterblasting 1 to restand all of his front row rear guards. I no guard this, and with ALFKNIGHTS' skill, he has a third drive check. Vanguard attacks again for 23, and despite not using its booster that's available, I still need to take this. The next attack comes for 25, and I really don't have better shield, so I need to perfect guard this. But at end of turn, Vanguard went to Soul because an ultimate skill was played this turn, letting Dan draw 1 and countercharge 1. So who knows, maybe Dan throwing and not using the booster that was right there is just some kind of psychological warfare. Because frankly, if it is, he's winning. On my turn I Persona Ride into Blangdmire NEXUS, but I also start my turn with Radiance Caliburn to draw 2. Next I'm using Blangdmire, binding 4 cards face down and forcing the opponent to bind some as well. By the way, this reading break is not actually going to help. But then I call Vyrgilla and use its skill, counterblasting 1 to soul charge 1, but unfortunately not giving me anything good to call. But here is where reading does not help me. Right here I'm attacking for 40k with Vyrgilla, when in reality it's supposed to be 45 with NEXUS. I just kind of forgot about the 5k buff he gives to the front row rear guards. So Dan guards here for 43, to which I do apologize for messing up the video, but luckily I do not think it changed that much in the match. Now NEXUS is attacking for 58k altogether, to which I do not use his divine skill. It's just too early, and the extra crit is not going to help much here. But I do get a heal, and then a Zamoog. I then attack with Vyrgilla for 60k, this time remembering the 5k buff as well as the 15 from Alchemist, but this time I forget the 5k again and attack for 35 instead of 40. Back onto Dan's turn, he luckily doesn't have a Persona Ride, but for 3 energy I'm losing my Vyrgilla. Dan gets back an Ezreal out of it, and then immediately goes into ALFKNIGHTS. Because he also has a copy of himself in Soul now, the front row is going to get 5k. It's not like a Persona Ride effect, but it just gives 5 to whatever's currently there. So because of that, Vyrgilla actually perfectly combos into itself, because he's going to call something and then ALFKNIGHTS is going to call another something. Anyways, Dan is also using the ultimate skill to check top 5 for something to call to rear, as well as buffing up his Vanguard. In this case, he gets a Shenri. Nerman also gets called, adding another ALFKNIGHTS to hand, and then Cosmore joins the party. First attack is 23, to which I guard, and then 33, energy charging 1 with Cosmore's effect. I take this and get a heal that will not heal me. ALFKNIGHTS attacks, counterblasting 1 to restand the front row rear guards, which Cosmore will see and also restand himself. Altogether he's attacking for I don't fucking know how much, and I perfect guard. 3 checks reveal a critical for Ezreal, a perfect guard, and a Shenri. Ezreal is now attacking for 43, 2 damage, to which I perfect guard again, and then a 36k attack from Vanguard is unfortunately going to be my 5th damage. At end of battle, Shenri goes to Soul to draw, and at end of turn, Vanguard goes to Soul to countercharge and draw. Now to me, I Persona Ride NEXUS again, call Zamoog, and check top 3, putting 2 into Soul, one of which is Colossus. With his skill when put to Soul, he binds himself and I draw 1. And then on top of that, because I put 2 as Zamoog's skill, I also draw 1. Netherworld Butcher gets called, and with his skill when placed, the opponent cannot intercept for the rest of the turn, which actually kinda really matters in this matchup. That's another 15k shield he doesn't get to use. Finally, I bind another NEXUS to activate Blangdmire's skill. Dan binds 2 of his rear guards, and I call Ophelia to the rear guard. Now, this time I remember the 5k buffs from NEXUS, and Zamoog is attacking for 30k, 2 damage. And as far as 2-card guards go, I'm always happy to see a perfect guard get out of it. Blangdmire then attacks, and with Evoke skill I counterblast 1 to restand Zamoog. And this is big number with Divine skill.
Okay, I need a number.
Right. But anyways, with Divine skill, I'm attacking for 63k, 2 damage, and the opponent cannot call or play perfect guards for the rest of the turn. Dan guards with his overtrigger and heal, making it a 78k guard, and then with Defensing Roar, making it 88k and returning the overtrigger back to hand at end of battle. My Twin Drive reveals nothing, unfortunately not thinning the deck enough I guess, but on attack, Butcher is going to put another Colossus into Soul, which will then use its skill to bind itself and draw. This attack should have been 53k altogether because Alchemist gave 15 when restanding him, but I forgot about that again, and me fucking now. So Dan is only guarding for 43 because that's all he thinks he needs to use. Granted, we just saw him return his overtrigger back to hand, so he can absolutely guard this and I don't think this misplay actually matters. Further cementing it, the next attack he just takes, so I will forgive myself for my own misplays. I'm just getting annoyed at how much I misplay in this video, so because of that I do apologize and I hope you're still enjoying the video, guys. Now, on to Dan's turn. I don't think he has any grade 2s to resurrect, so he immediately goes into ALFKNIGHTS. He gets his ultimate skill into Galaxian, but we can kinda skip forward a bit. He builds a field and he's ready to attack again, and is only attacking for 23, to which I guard. Another 23 attack comes and I guard it, but for Vanguard's attack, it's huge and restanding the front row rear guards, also restanding the Cosmores with them, so I need to no guard and hope for a heal. Dan finally finds his Persona rhymes and doesn't get any triggers, something I unfortunately share in common.